Hello, this is Tina Swithin with My Family Court Story. Good morning. I am really looking forward to this conversation. I am looking forward to learning more about your story. Your story has really picked up a lot of momentum in the world of family court reform and advocacy, which is how it hit my radar initially. And I want to be really careful in setting the stage for this interview, for our time together. Everything we are discussing are allegations. I'm not taking a position legally, but I do think your story is eye-opening and it sheds so much light on the reality that parents are facing in the family court system. Um, my goal for our time together is to get some clarification on a few things, to understand the bigger picture. I know that so many people are very well-meaning, and but I've seen time and time again over the past decade plus where other people sharing stories, things get lost in translation, get confused, the facts may be a little bit off. So I thought it was really important for us to talk to you directly, to hear what your family's story is. So the first thing I want to start with is there has been some confusion surrounding your name. So can you start by telling us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. And if I might, first of all, just say thank you so much, Tina, for this opportunity, for your willingness to expand our reach in our story with your platform. I personally have followed your story, One Mom's Battle, for many, many years, like others, and it really has truly helped me to be able to process what I'm going through, what I'm experiencing, and yes, these threads that our stories seem to share. And so I just want to say it's an honor to be here today, and thank you for the opportunity. Um, that said, my full legal name is Marlana Yvette Christopher. I was actually born in California, Marlena Yvette Christopher. And I understand that, as some people have seen documents recently that were basically the foundation of our story, yes, gaining momentum. They've seen Marlena Yvette. And when I actually went through a divorce in 2008, as women, when we go through these changes, our names change. And as I started as a young teen mom, and going through divorce and name changes, I just kind of decided at that time that I wanted to not change my last name anymore. And so I asked the court to change it to Marlene Yvette, and they did. And so when my story and family court story journey began with my daughter, um, pleadings, everything was in the name of Marlene Yvette. And so that's how I became known to even those systemically that have brought to where we are today. And when I was underground, there was a period of time that, because of my family court story, I had to make that difficult decision. Also, surrounding my daughter, I never used inappropriate or alias identities with law enforcement or government bodies the entire time I was underground. And so Marlena Yvette Christopher, without my court order, was the only name that California Department of Public Safety was willing to reissue my license under. And so I've actually been Marlena Yvette Christopher since 2018. And so I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share that, because that has been something that has even come up by opposing counsel. So it's not a conspiracy. There's no attempt to misconstrue it. And so now I am proudly, fully, again, as I was at birth, maiden name Marlene Yvette Christopher.
Got it. Thank you. I know the feeling of it's empowering to go back to our foundational identity. And I'm remarried and I have kept my maiden name. That is who I am. That is who I will be. And so I relate to and understand that completely. I know, given, you sharing that you've been a part of One Mom's Battle of our community for many years, We created something called the post separation abuse wheel, which, if someone is not familiar with that, they can find it at postseparationabuse.com. But when you are looking at that wheel, or when you have looked at it in the past, how do you feel that your story fits with our mission, which is very much awareness, education, exposure on the system and what is happening? The reality that so many people face when they walk into the family court system, that when I created that wheel, it was very much to describe my own journey and what I had experienced. And then in talking to others, so many people will email me and say, when I saw this wheel, I related to it. It is the first thing that has helped me to articulate what I was experiencing. So, how do you find that your story aligns with that?
Absolutely. Even before you explained how other mothers have identified, if I could pick simplistic words, I look at that post separation abuse wheel that you've created and I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel understood, right? I feel clarity, right? I feel, um, in many ways, also connected, right? So many times when we experience not the freedom that oftentimes society and well-intended people believe we will receive when we just leave, right? We just get away from the abuse. Many think that things get better, and in some cases and situations, they do. In others, they get substantially worse because now we go from what was seemingly intimate partner violence or one on one domestic violence and abuses. And of course, this could be of all types, not just physical. We know that, as you definitely explained and outlined clearly, crystal clearly through your wheel. But it gets worse because now enter the institutional betrayal that starts to occur, and the weaponization of the very systems that are designed in society, paid by taxpayers to protect and serve. Now they, with many people, intentionally, unintentionally, knowingly, unknowingly, they now become partners in the abuse. And so it really is the clearest visual description that I have seen over the years in what is actually going on. And I believe it gives a certain sense of freedom to those like myself that are seeing it, to say, number one, as they try to convince us we're not crazy. And then most importantly, we're not alone. And so, again, thank you for this work of being able to put it into a picture. They say sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think your post separation abuse wheel is probably worth 1,000,000.
Well, and just piggybacking on what you said, so many, we tell survivors to be brave and to leave the abusive situation. And so they believe they're doing the right thing. And they believe that these systems are in place to rally around and protect them and their children, most importantly. And we know the 101 of domestic abuse is that it's about power and control. And so it's very, it goes to show the lack of education in the system. And with these professionals, that need for power and control doesn't just dissipate when the relationship ends. It intensifies the majority of the time, and it transfers to the new venue, which is family court, and which is why we are here today. Um, I want to start with some foundational information to help people get a better understanding of your background, of who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So for me, I am, and I don't mind stating, I actually just had a birthday. And so 45. I have been a mother, blessed to be a mother to seven, actually, five by natural birth, and two that I always referred to and still do by extra blessing. And that was through remarriage. So I had two former bonus sons along with my natural children. My children now are, of course, with my daughter. She is now 10. We unfortunately did lose, after my 20-year-old that is still with us, my 25-year-old son just back in April. I have a 27-year-old son and a 29-year-old son. And then my bonus sons, oldest one is 30, and the other one is in between my two oldest. And so it's a wide range. But I really feel as though being a mother, even though I started at a very young age, it has been my greatest gift of my life. It is my life. I believe just caring for, loving, being able to, whether a single mother or a married mother, and co parent, right? It has been my greatest work. And so, definitely, I want to make sure that I can share that that is the frame of reference that I'm coming into this situation with. Um, I was a teen mom and military wife at the age of 17 when I had my first two sons. And so my oldest three, they have the same father. And then my next relationship that started when I was 20, 21, uh, that is where my youngest son has come from. And that was my second marriage. And then my third and last final relationship that started in 2010 is where my daughter came from. And so her father and I became pregnant with her in 2013. We were never married, never lived together. And that was officially my last dating relationship. I've been single for 11 years now, and definitely, me, like so many others, oftentimes when we are participating in what we would call the abuse cycle, before we recognize that is what we are in, we'll have average 3 to 5 relationships and sometimes multiple other parents in those relationships. And so that is the foundation from which my story emerges. The other two cases did hit family court. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds or too much into those stories. I want to stay very focused on where we are today. But my experience with the family court system has actually now been, I would say, since the year 2000. We're in 24, so 24 years of seeing how the family court system works, associated professionals that are called in and a part of, child protection, separation, and various different dynamics. And so, yeah, I'm just at the door of about 25 years of experience of seeing what does it look like, what does it feel like, what does it sound like, how does it operate and function when it's working? I have seen that. How does it operate and function when nothing is working and everything in between? So that is the foundation that I'm coming to this conversation today.
More than half your life. I mean, that is
Absolutely.
quite a journey. And thank you for sharing that. I think it gives people a good overview, a good foundation. But the next part of this, which is really what put you on my radar, I understand that you were recently arrested for what Texas calls interference with child custody. And in my opinion, that is a very dangerous law for protective parents. Um, it is terrifying to think that it's happening in Texas. I have seen very quite a few mothers arrested over the years for what they call interfering with child custody, but most of the time it is trying to listen to your child, to believe your child, to protect your child. So, can you help us understand? I know this is a currently a legal issue, and I want to respect that. But is there anything you can share to help us understand what that law means and a bit about what transpired, what happened that led up to your arrest and subsequent incarceration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just share so many of your sentiments about these laws. I think whether at their inception, I believe in Texas, it was somewhere late 70s, early 80s, I believe, when this law came into the effect of being placed into the Texas Penal Criminal Code. Don't quote me on that. I'm certainly not now or at any time in this interview seeking to give legal advice. I'm not an attorney, so I need to give that disclaimer. I'm a mom that does know these laws intimately because, as you said, it has been more than half my life. and I've had to learn how to maneuver and stay legal, lawful, safe, and appropriate within a system that sometimes serves and oftentimes doesn't serve us. But regardless of its intent, it absolutely has become, like you said, a weapon that has been used against not just protective mothers or protective parents, as we refer to ourselves and others refer to us, but it has actually been a tool that has been weaponized against us when we are actually legally, lawfully mandated protective parents. And this is the part that so many in society actually do not understand, unfortunately, is they don't understand when we are acting to, like you said, first listen to, right? What good parent doesn't listen to their child to truly hear them? There's a difference between listening and truly hearing, and then believe the voice of a child, especially when, yes, as parents, we know times when they maybe come into the room and they're turning flips and they're, maybe saying something funny and they're kidding and they're joking, and we know when they're telling the truth, right? And oftentimes, most of us, we also look for even corroborating evidence and signs, and we do a little bit of digging. We don't immediately jump to, it's true, it happened. And we're not looking for things that our children need to be protected from to show up. For most of us, like me, if there are many I know watching this like me, when disclosures, when actual injuries, when things that are medically documented do show up, we wish they didn't. Not just because of how the family court system and associated professionals respond, but because we don't want to see our children harmed. But the
Right.
reality is the law mandates in Texas, like in most other states, that we have a duty to protect our children. Texas Penal Code outlines crimes of commission, what you did do, crimes of omission, what you failed to do, even when it relates to how the other parent or others that are acting in parentis locus or acting in the place of a parent, it tells us we have a responsibility. The first responsibility is if we have suspected abuse or neglect or even exposure to family violence, we have to report it. That's the first part. That is covered under the Texas Family Code, the Texas Penal Criminal Code, as well as Texas child welfare laws. Now, because I'm not an attorney, I'm not quoting the sections and codes right now. People can Google it, they will find it on my public Facebook that I've had for a couple of years now. I actually outline specific codes, so definitely people can do their own research and find it. But those are our mandates. It is our duty and our right. And so what people don't understand is what I call the child protection catch 22, is that the same laws that are set up to protect the most vulnerable in society, which is our children, and they say, if you're aware of, you cannot place your child in or fail to remove your child from an environment, a person, a situation where they are being abused or neglected, or you have reasonable good faith suspicion of it, this is what you must do. Or the alternative is you are in a position where you have, as Texas CPS and many others called it, you have engaged in failure to protect, you have engaged in neglectful supervision, they call it. And it actually is the cause that many have lost their children through the system, family court, CPS, because of what they failed to do once they became made aware. Now, interference with child custody basically removes, a lot of times when it's being done, oftentimes to protective mothers, it removes any acknowledgement that those laws exist. And it says, bottom line, if there is a family court order where someone has gone into court to what we sometimes call pay to play and win rights to their children, parental rights, whether it has fully considered backgrounds of family violence, other abuses of power and control, or these issues of neglect and abuse, when those family court orders have been issued, if they're in place granting possession time, custody, care, and control to the parent that the child needs to be protected from, you still need to turn that child over. That is the basis of interference with child custody, is you need to comply with those orders, right? Civilly, the equivalent is contempt of court or enforcement. When there are ripe family court matters, that is oftentimes the appropriate, best way that it's handled. When it's criminalized and the legal justice criminal system is brought into the equation, we are turned into criminals. And yes, we are alleged to have committed interference with child custody because we didn't follow a court order that said, hey, it's that parent's parenting time, while also trying to not ignore the other three laws that say we need to make sure that we're keeping our children safe. And so in my particular case, I was absolutely in cooperation with Texas police. My daughter and her father primarily live in Texas. I am an Oklahoma resident. We're about 2 hours apart from one another. It was a mandated professional that did call in concerns about my daughter, pertaining to what she reported and what was also even seen and believed to be throat injury on x-ray, where she was allegedly pulled by the back of her shirt, lifted off the ground, and then also medically neglected, where she had a prolonged cough that wasn't being treated as prescribed. It was allowed to continue to remain for about 2 months. And I was working with her primary care physician that told me to take her to the emergency room or urgent care. We got x-rays. They prescribed new medications. So I had 5 and 10-day prescriptions of steroids and antibiotics. That started October 21st. October 31st, after we got through the first round, we went back and had her rechecked. And the doctors even confirmed a lot of the infection that had been allowed to remain when under the custody, care, and control of her father had actually cleared up with me actually giving the medication as prescribed. So that was good, but there was a narrowing in her airway that had not cleared up, for which I was pending getting into an ENT specialist, and also because of the report by the CPS, the state mandated professional that led to a CPS investigation and a dual police investigation in Texas. I was actually cooperating with them, noticing them why, yes, I was taking the appropriate legal action to not return her to the environment ahead of her ENT specialist appointment, ahead of now the requested CPS forensic interview, and ahead of the completion of the Texas police criminal investigation. And I do believe my story gained momentum because as I was able to provide proof before, while, and after my arrest and 2-week-long incarceration in both Oklahoma and Texas jails, I think the part that really shocked everyone is, wait a minute, this mom was cooperating with the laws of the Texas Penal Code, Child Welfare, and Family Code and protecting her child, and she was cooperating with the actual police agency that called for her arrest and what she's mandated to do. And so I think that's where utilizing interference with child custody, which, if it occurs, would be a situation where someone just says, I don't want to turn the child over. There's no legitimate reason. I just don't want to, right? I'm going to keep the child. Maybe they're not paying child support. Some other reason that a parent comes up with to say we're going to violate the court order. That might be a situation that criminally could arise to interference with child custody, but it certainly is not made to penalize, criminalize, and punish legally, lawfully mandated protective parents for doing what the law tells them to do. Because the other alternative to 2-year state jail felony interference with child custody in Texas is failure to protect laws that in Texas and Oklahoma are actually 99 years to life. And so there is another case, again, people can Google it, Tondelo Hall. She was a mother out of the state of Oklahoma, where is either father of her child or boyfriend. I don't know her personally, but I've read her story, and it definitely gained national attention. Even though I believe she also may have been a dual victim, which often happens a lot of times in these cases as well. The child was harmed and or killed, and the perpetrator, the male that actually hurt the child, got 2 years, and she, as the mother for failing to protect, got a 45-year sentence in Oklahoma. She served 15 years hard time for failing to protect. And then she eventually, through advocacy, like what you and many others do, got clemency in Oklahoma after 15 years of being taken from her children, them from her, for failing to protect. And so, interference with child custody right now, Texas is, I understand, the primary battleground state where the other side that is claiming things like what many understand is junk science or debunked theories of parental alienation, they are fighting and advocating for interference with child custody and to criminalize more legally, lawfully safe, protective parents. And so I know I may have encompassed some other questions and things we might delve into, and feel free to dig a little bit deeper. But that is my understanding of interference with child custody and how it relates personally and directly to my story, and how, yes, I do believe I was falsely arrested and imprisoned for 2 weeks to find out if the district attorneys of Denton County are going to pick up charges. At this point, they have not. At this point, it was a warrant based on patently false allegations that will be proven. It was an arrest and it was an incarceration, all under the basis of alleged interference with child custody.
I continue to call what's happening in the family court system a crisis. When we are jailing good, healthy, loving mothers for simply following the recommendations of professionals in the system or law enforcement agents, it's a no-win situation. Our hands, I often say, when you walk into the family court system, when you receive your family court case number, you're also assigned your own personal terrorist, your ex, who is given free rein to abuse you. But at that same time, your hands are tied behind your back by the very system that is supposed to be protecting us. And that it's inhumane, it should be criminal. Yet we are jailing mothers. And you touched on parental alienation, and I'm going to ask a question about that in just a little bit. But the reality is the person who concocted this pseudo theory, Richard Gardner, he actually wanted to pave the way to put mothers in jail. That was, we actually have him on film saying a quote about, it will be easier to jail mothers. And, so many of us say, if the everyday citizen recognized what was happening in our family court system, they would stand with us in outrage. And that is really what we need to happen. Which brings me to the topic. This is Family Court Awareness Month, November. And part of creating that campaign for us back in 2020 was to, so many of these things, we're talking about it as advocates, but these are all people who are in it and who get it. And we need legislative change. That's one of the areas that is so important to tackle. It's an area that I'm also actively involved in. But the missing component has been raising awareness within our communities, because our neighbors need to know what's happening, our city council members, our mayors. And when we have brave survivors going forward to city council meetings and sharing their story, and these mayors are proclaiming November to be Family Court Awareness Month, it's really been amazing to watch, because it's educating people within our communities about what is happening behind closed doors. And we've been featuring some audio clips and protecting people's identity in a series on social media that we've been calling My Family Court Story. So if you had to explain to someone your family court story, that kind of the nutshell version, or, I know it has spanned more than half your life. but what would be your family court story that you want others to know?
Wow. Yes, again, thank you for family court awareness. I originally decided um, to wear, well, I initially was going to wear blue in honor of National Family Court Awareness Month. I'm wearing pink because it's my daughter's favorite color instead. But you're absolutely correct. The awareness is huge. And um, I will say that I have been particularly blessed that I have met people from 2016 when I was faced with the difficult decision to have to make the ultimate choice to take what was not working in the family court system already for 13, 14, 15, concealing abuses and neglects against one of my other children. I had to make that difficult decision um, to actually flee the system, right? Unfortunately, flee the fact that they were not um, paying attention to the laws that are built in to keep children safe. And so, what I can say is, prior to that, I saw the system work. That was many, many years ago, about 20 years ago. And then since 2013, I have watched the system continuously fail to work as policy has prescribed, as it's written in the law books. I've seen family court professionals, and I say that in quotations, including attorneys, that they know the law, but they continue to break it with impunity. They continue to file false, fraudulent pleadings, which is also criminally committing perjury. I have found that this is not something that, for the most part, DAs and prosecutors are interested in actually prosecuting. And so it is oftentimes has been kangaroo court hearings that are all over the place, right? It is just a slew of false allegations made through pleadings that, again, the party that can pay to play and win, and oftentimes conceal and cause the commodification of crisis the most. That seems to be the party that is given primary, greater, or sole custody, because, like in my case, it is exactly what will cause these cases to go on and on and on and on and on. So my story has expanded starting in February of 2013, taking that terrible turn in November of 2013, unfortunately losing my youngest son, even though, again, 45, having raised 7 children, I have no abuse, no neglect, um, family violence, no criminal record, mental health, alcohol, drug history, any of these dynamics where I've ever been determined to be unfit, none of that has mattered. And so I've been in this situation now for, again, 11 years, watching those who are in positions of power abuse their power within the family court system and associated systems, oftentimes concealing the abuse and choosing the path that commodifies it most. When I say commodifying crisis and commodifying it most, which one is going to cause the need for psychological evaluations in those professionals? Which one is going to cause the most continued fighting where attorneys are being paid and there's also other funds being released? That was my experience. And so there are laws built into the system in every state that even allow for fleeing domestic violence or child abuse. Again, not an attorney, check your states. Oftentimes, they will have provisions that once you get to the refuge state or get to the refuge location, maybe it's checking in with police or CPS or a certain amount of time to make court filings. But I actually had to go through that in attempting to protect my daughter when she was 2, because there were medical records 8 days apart to prove what my daughter did not say, so could not be coached about. But we're looking at just medical records. Whether the family courts were prepared to acknowledge an order in alignment with those very serious allegations or not, because they knew it existed and I was not lying, I was never charged when I fled the state of Texas with my daughter. I was never charged with interference with child custody. I was never even charged with contempt of court for that fleeing in 2016. I did have to live underground to, one, try to protect myself, where there were also fatal shooting threats made against me by her father. Um, I was attempting to protect my daughter. I was able to protect her 93 days and 92 nights, made it to Pennsylvania. And as I never obscured my identity when law enforcement asked me, I had about 4 different encounters with law enforcement in multiple states. I gave them my identity and even told them what I was fleeing from every time. I never hid that. It wasn't until the fourth time working with Pennsylvania CYS that they basically sent her right back into her abuse and neglect. And so, in that, because there was a custody change hearing, that's another ploy that often happens in this playbook. If we get to the worst case scenario of dotting, checking all the boxes, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, of trying to let the system work, and now it doesn't, and so someone feels as though they need to flee. While I'm certainly not encouraging people to make that, that is a personal decision, and everyone's case is different. So definitely it's one to be made with hopefully trustworthy legal counsel and everyone weighing their own personal pros and cons. So I'm not advocating for people to flee, but I'm just sharing my stories. I've been asked. Um, really is a situation where oftentimes, if they stop showing up to prevent their personal risk, to try to protect the child because the system's not working, they'll move to switch custody. And so that was done in my case as well. And because I didn't show up by default, he got custody. Oftentimes, when that occurs, they are considered now mothers, oftentimes. Now, fathers do this too, and we're not seeing the same results in how they are framed when they do it, but mothers are framed as a flight risk, and oftentimes they will never be allowed unsupervised custody with their children again. The reason being is they understand that the things that have happened, the story's not going to change. The facts aren't going to change. And if they reunite that mother and that child, more of what has been concealed and covered up in the past may spring forward again, right? They know oftentimes someone engaging in abuse of power and control and neglect, oftentimes they're not going to have the self-reflection to change. So new incidences will occur. So even if the mother says we'll leave the past in the past and start where we pick up again, not talk about that anymore, and focus on where we are, what they also know is that the abuse is going to continue. So there will be new disclosures. And that was my story as well. I had supervised visits ordered when I did not go to court after fleeing. Dad actually interfered with my child custody all of 2022, 2023, and 5 days after I was able to get my rights back. And the judge ordered him to turn him over at a Midway police department, the same police department that had me arrested and jailed, refused to file interference of child custody charges against dad. This is video recorded 5 days after a judge ordered it. And he didn't have the excuse of, I'm protecting her. He basically said, I'm at work. She's at home with two other individuals. By the way, mom was supposed to request it in an app, our family wizard. That was not in our court orders. And the same police department that came after me and put me in jail would not file for dad. And so it is a situation where we see extreme biases for the party that is continuing to stew and brew new reasons for new disclosures and new protection, and the one that is fighting the best that they can, legally, lawfully, safely, and appropriate, for them to turn against them and continue to create a situation that never ends. I will say another part of my story is, even though I fled, had to live underground, and work on putting together all the facts, the evidence, educating myself to come back, fight, request my freedom from the system where I could re-enter the family courts. Mother's Day 2022, my daughter's father actually said I could come and see her at a park. It was just said, come by the house, the park right on the next street. I will bring her to you. I waited outside for 2 hours. They never showed up. I texted, I emailed, I called. I later found out he actually left me a slurring voicemail. He has a heavy history and now felony for DWI and DUI. And I had heard him on the phone talking to him that day. He was engaging in some road rage. And so after 2 hours, I was very concerned that they hadn't shown up. Did they get in an accident? Is something wrong? And so I did. I proceeded to the home. When I first showed up there, my daughter was actually outside unattended. And I said, I said her name, and she was like, "Who is this?" And I said, "It's mom." And she jumped up and down and ran into my arms. And that was literally the first time we were reunited at that point in 6 years, as I got to hold my baby girl for 2 minutes in 6 years, while he was allowed to violate even my supervised visits that I requested properly, that I went through the channels properly to get. And she's like, "Come inside, come inside." Of course, that's when I realized she hadn't even been told that the park visit was happening, right? That's a part of the psychological torture, is dangling the child. You can see her. Just kidding. No, you can't, which is something that he has well documented done over and over and over again during this time. And at first, he didn't have a problem with me being there. Because of the false allegations, because of the threats, I don't engage him directly personally. So this entire incident was about 4 minutes, fully recorded on video, audio clear, everything clear of what did and didn't happen. And even with that, he got upset when he saw he was being recorded and asked that the recording asked that the recording be taken off, that the person that was recording stop recording. When I asked the question why, he said, "Okay, that's fine," and went to shut the door. And I literally just had a protective foot in the door. I did not enter his home. I didn't do anything aggressive. He actually then assaulted me in front of our daughter, shoving me forcefully out of the door. Said, "Should we call the police?" I said, "Maybe, perhaps we should." He has a second child now. He was holding that child in one hand and an alcoholic beverage in the other hand, and assaulted me in front of our daughter. The police showed up. They looked at the video of me being assaulted and not entering the home, and they arrested me on Mother's Day 2022. This year, after he did the interference with child custody on Easter Sunday, 5 days after a new custody judge restored my relationship with my daughter, unsupervised after 3 step-up visits, Easter Sunday was the first, I did a FOIA request for the body cam, where we asked for interference with child custody, and they denied it and said it's a civil matter. Then he said, go back to the Midway Police Department, where he was supposed to take the child and deliver and surrender her. It's their problem. That's another associated county in between me and Dad's address. So he punted the ball to family court, punted the ball to, oh, that's another police department, but there's no interference with child custody here. Apparently, you were supposed to have an app. And I'm just trying to learn about the app. I mean, it was almost as if he was poking fun, but they denied my interference with child custody. We got on body cam that he even referenced, "Hey, I think I'm going to come see you when this is over at work." But also in that report, I was able to get internal records that said, mom makes false allegations. She states that he has robbery. She states that he has different situations where we've had to investigate her. We actually had to charge her with criminal trespass, which the district attorney's office didn't pick up because there was video evidence disputing directly what they put in their police report. And the reality is I have all the evidence disproving everything that they have said about me, including the fact that they characterized that incident as me barging into the home. I never entered the home. And that's probably why the DA's office thankfully did not pick it up. But what my story has been is constantly fighting perjured, falsely filed, false allegations against me that evidence always proves are not how they're being characterized, but it's being allowed to happen in post-separation abuse and the weaponization of family courts. And now we're in a place where a TRO has actually been issued post me getting out of jail. I'm going to have to respond to that December 2nd. And it just has been a seemingly helpless situation. I am not hopeless. I have great hope because of those doing work like When Moms Battle and what you all are doing here, what Family Court Awareness Month is doing. I have hope because of how, when I was silenced and I couldn't speak during that time of 2 weeks of incarceration, how everyone else did speak. And it really tells me that we're gaining ground. And like you said, Tina, our neighbors, right? Our church members, our community members, more people starting to understand, wait a minute, this is not a bunch of crazy vindictive moms or um, protective parents that are just trying to, and I'll use this language because I heard it was used in a professional attorney meeting somewhere, that protecting my child means I'm going to screw my ex. That's not what's happening. And so my story has been seeing every aspect of what is reported to be occurring widespread in family courts and doing everything that I can to respond to it only as much as is necessary, um, to balance that with my desire to maintain the integrity of a private court process that the law says should be somewhat public and have oversight, which is why we do things like this. There should be oversight. Um, Balancing that with my child's privacy and freedoms, but also understanding when it gets to these levels that they are willing to arrest a parent that is cooperating with Texas and Oklahoma and other states, CPS and police at child advocacy centers. When it's getting to that level, unfortunately, my story is I'm forced to speak out
Too.
because otherwise we literally are defeated in silence.
Yeah.
And so I know that's probably a much greater version than I wanted to give. Um, but I feel like I have really seen it all, and we are working to get through it all,
Yeah.
in what you outline and describe, in post separation abuse, family court awareness.
Yeah. And I know, even though we have made great steps forward when it comes to awareness, there are still people who hear these stories and think, but there has to be more. There has to be something that she's not sharing. You've clarified you've never been accused of being an unfit mother prior to these arrests and incarceration. There's no criminal background on your part. There's no addiction issues, mental health concerns, nothing that has ever been cited. If we were to shift to the other side, and again, preface this with these are allegations, what have been the factual criminal or concerns about your ex, the father?
Absolutely. And so, yes, we need to say alleged, but in 2021, I was actually provided with his certified Texas criminal conviction record. He does have another child, and that's my daughter's sibling, younger child. Um, the mother of that child is a licensed professional counselor supervisor, former CPS counselor to families dealing with physical and CSA, child sexual abuse, and also drug and alcohol counselor. And as they were now trying to navigate, and her finding out very quickly that things would not work with um, their child the way that perhaps she hoped at 6 weeks, she reached out to me and was able to provide me with his certified criminal record. And so I will speak to what that record says. It says that yes, he has been convicted of aggravated robbery. That's a felony. It says in 2019, while I was underground, yes, he was convicted of 3 or more DWIs and DUIs in the state of Texas, which is a felony. It outlines convictions for drug involvement, multiple convictions. It has evading arrest, failure to identify as a fugitive from justice, using an alias while I was on the inside. I was there with a woman that is facing 15 years for giving a false identity to police. And she said that they're going down that path because of priors like the other side has. And she's facing 15 years. But for some reason, his is being concealed as if none of this has occurred. And that record I got through the FOIA request actually says from an active Texas Police Department, there is no criminal record found, but I hold it. And so everything you can imagine and can imagine as reasons that people lose custody, it is there for him. It is not there for me, but it is ignored intentionally and knowingly by the family courts, including publicly disclosed road rage incidences that have been reported because he has a business. So everything that you literally would protect a child from, that we see as common for people to lose custody, drugs, alcohol, fleeing, police, all of these different dynamics, they are there and they are existent in his criminal background conviction history.
Unbelievable, but not. I always say there is truly nothing that could shock me when it comes to family court. And shifting the spotlight from what has transpired with law enforcement and these recent issues to the family court system. Has family court taken any action surrounding your arrest and incarceration?
Absolutely. So just Friday, so this would have been 2 days ago, the father and his attorney did file what they call a temporary ex parte restraining order, and that was granted by the family courts. Basically, it's an application that was done where I was not notified. Now, in my county of Collin, that actually was a violation of their local rules. Unless certain factors exist, which don't, they were not pled and alleged. So this was something that, honestly, in my opinion, based on the law, based on how I've learned it is to be used and not used, temporary ex parte over the years, I believe this was improper. We do have a new judge, was actually just appointed by Governor Greg Abbott, and our case assigned into her court. These are for particularly the goal in him creating this new court and appointing this new judge is for particularly complex, what they call high conflict family law cases. And ours was picked as unfortunately it has dragged on literally since my daughter was a baby. I will say we are in the range of having at least 15 judges that have touched our case over the years, and she's 10. One is now a justice. I will say before she was promoted and appointed into that position, also by Governor Greg Abbott, even though she did take the actions costing me primary custody to move to supervise when I fled, those years that I was learning more about the law and needing to stay safe and have my legal freedom, as well as my safety protection freedom from a man that has threatened for me to no longer exist at all because of my fight in family court, which is another issue that is very common, right? Our risks when we leave and when we fight and start to gain ground, they actually increase for lethality. But that judge did finally actually recall warrants that were there for failure to appear and alleged interference with child custody. That was through the DA's office pertaining to my son. Pro se, I had to fight all of that, and I was successfully able to do that. For which, again, I'm thankful to those judges. I'm thankful to the DA. I'm thankful that that judge, now justice, finally did reverse and pay attention to some of the other collusion by court professionals that caused that and also left me without defense and redress for over 5 years, right? I'm thankful for that. But I also have to acknowledge the fact that they did it to begin with to even create the environment and the circumstances for it to occur. Again, my daughter is 10 and a half. We saw each other for 2 minutes in 8 years. When we got the new judge prior to the judge's court that it's in now, that judge actually did listen to all of the dynamics after a full day trial, end of March of this year, 2024. He listened to Dad, he listened to me, he listened to witnesses that took the stand. And honestly, he was a little bit confused and said it. I'm trying to figure out, based on everything I've seen and heard, Mom, why don't you have your child? And I was able to actually tell him even about the allegation in 2016, backed up by medical records 8 days apart, of her child sexual abuse. I admitted I fled, also the threats that Dad had made against me. And because I didn't show up for that hearing, fleeing for my life and the protection of my child, yeah, he got custody. That he has denied custody, even through supervised visits. He allowed me to state all of that on the record and said, well, I'm fixing that today. And we had 3 step-up visits that, again, Dad immediately interfered with all of them. And so family court absolutely did lay the groundwork. They have created and allowed the environment for all of this to occur. And at this point, family court has moved and said, yes, for the next 10 days, counselor and Dad, Mom can't have access to the child. But again, we will go back December 2nd to see how that lands. And I am hopeful, I'm prayerful, I'm intentional in my preparation with evidence, facts, and law, that I do believe that we will move to get that overturned and the proper orders in place for the protection and safety of my daughter and the restoration of our parent-child relationship in accordance with the law.
I know we are all, whether it's prayer, whether it's cheering for you, sending positive thoughts, I know so many people have gathered around. And I'm grateful you have that.